I'm assuming command of this vessel. Mr. Scott.
Aye, sir.
We'll be going to warp speed.
Aye, sir.
Back at the beginning of ILM, when like Jedi was going on, Empire, and of course Wrath of Khan, state-of-the-art really was using models on blue screen pylons, a lot of major lighting schemes to shoot the models against blue screen, the motion control camera going down the track, shooting all the models so it looks like the models are flying, background star fields, which basically were pinpricks in a black field painted on plexiglass, backlit, high-tech. I'm telling you.
There wasn't really any kind of production system. So putting it together, compositing it, all require these new techniques. And we just had to go by the seat of the pants on this one. We were changing an industry.
Now, the computer seems to be the catch-all solution to every type of effects problem. And back then, when they were talking about the Genesis device or some sort of damage happening to the ship, you needed to be really creative to come up with a way of creating that.
I thought it was a lot of fun, a lot of pyrotechnics to shoot, things blowing up, a lot of physical work on the set every single day shooting the models. It was great. I have very fond memories of those days. This project came up. They knew that I wanted to supervise, managed to get the job along with Jim Valou. We co-supervised that film. We would do lighting tests. We would talk about what we loved about the first movie, what we wanted to simplify, because we didn't have the time they had on that. And we didn't want to get into all the elaborate lighting setups exactly the way they did, because we didn't have time to do it, and that wasn't the look we wanted. So we're trying to get a cross-section between the TV show, which was very simple, and then we wanted to kind of pull it into like the first movie, which was so beautiful, and just find a mid-ground in there that worked for the film and gave it kind of the like I said, the energy of it and a little more, punch to the imagery. Something a little more like a comic book, more action-adventure.
Aft torpedoes! Fire!
Starts out with the effects supervisor, has direct contact with the director, and they come up with storyboards.
All you have to do is get the storyboards right, and ILM then shows you the various versions of the shots, and you wait for them to come in, and you make little adjustments and so forth.
Through that process, then Ken Ralston, who was the effects supervisor, would break up the needs of the shots and come up with a shopping list of in my case, 3D models.
For instance, when the Reliant is attacking the Enterprise at the beginning, that's all storyboarded out as to what the director wants to see, generally. And that gives me kind of my Bible to follow that when I'm creating the shots. And I thought a fascinating part of Wrath of Khan is they would do a test screening and cut into the effect shots that weren't there would be just the storyboard. And I'll tell you, that worked better than I think all the trouble they go through now, where they do all these pre-visualizations on computers and stuff. The audience totally got what the movie was about just by shooting the storyboard.
We had a VistaVision camera, huge VistaVision camera. Very, very steady. So it's ideal for all this motion control stuff.
It's easier to have the camera on basically a track. It's all computerized, so what you're doing is you're programming in with a joystick the camera track move, pan, tilt, And what you're trying to do using these moves on the camera is give the impression the model is doing all these moves. The only thing the model could physically do would maybe be yaw, as we called it, on a rotating platform. Everything else is the camera flying by the model to give the impression that the model is actually the ship in space is flying right by you, just skimming the surface of the camera.
We are now entering the Mutara Nebula.
We essentially poured in, which is about 3/4 of the way, with salt water, lay a plastic sheet on it, clear water, carefully pull the sheet out, and that gives you an inversion layer between the clear water and the salt water, and start to create these shapes inside. And we start to throw the lighting scheme together as quickly as possible. This thing's moving and changing all the time. So the camera's ready. We're ready with shooting it probably at 2 frames a second to speed up the movement. And as soon as anything started to come together, I'd roll. The way we would do a composite for the nebula shots, it would be the background plate to everything. It would be what was behind all the other actions. And using a lot of different matte work, creating black mats, and then that element of the Enterprise would be basically stuck right on top of the background plate, then the Reliant stuck on there. Steve Gawley was and still is one of the main model makers at Industrial Light and Magic. His job was building the new ships that we were using.
We got involved in Star Trek II right after Empire Strikes Back. The next projects at ILM involved splitting up the model shop on 3 shows, Poltergeist, E.T., and Star Trek II. And so I was fortunate enough to work on Star Trek II.
Working with Steve was great, except for the time where he told us that we were going to this restaurant where you had to wear a cowboy hat. And we all walked in, and we were the only ones wearing cowboy hats, and I will never forgive him for that.
Reliant in our section, this quadrant, and slowing.
I'll tell you a cute story with the Reliant is that when the original design was presented to Paramount, it was presented this way, and the producer on that side saw it with the engines below the dish, and he was taken by that design so much. Oh, that's great, but in fact they were drawn with the engines above the dish, and so that was kind of a happy accident that happened before the show started. So that's how that was designed.
When we designed and built the Reliant, we made it a little bit smaller. It was about 3/4 the actual scale in relation to the Enterprise, which made it a lot easier to move around on stage.
For pyro, what we normally do is build close-up sections and larger scale sections. One thing that's really hard to do in miniatures is fire. So the larger your close-up section can be, the more chance that the flames look correct.
Fire!
Khan, the bad guy, actually hijacks a Federation ship. Now, normally in a story you would have some sort of alien ship against the Enterprise, and it's pretty easy to tell the difference between the two. In this, you had two Federation ships, the good guys and the bad guys, and the producers were very concerned that the audience be able to tell the two apart, because although they were very different designs, they both had the dish, they both had the twin engines, and you could see how someone could easily become confused. And I guess Ken had to make sure that the producers were comfortable with the fact that, yeah, people will be able to tell the difference.
By doing lighting and the way that the stage crew lights the exterior and films it, they can really give life to some of the models so that you know that's the Reliant.
You're talking about giving the model life when you add lighting to it. So when you add blinking lights, that really is a nice little feature that's added.
They can also do some stuff when we put the lights in them that makes them the good guys or the evil guys.
Allow me to introduce you to SETI Alpha 5's only remaining indigenous life form. What do you think?
The SETI eel sequence was a lot of fun for me to do. I literally designed the model, then I sculpted it out of clay, and I really built the whole thing. And then I operated it, and because I am no mechanical genius, the way it worked was the tail was essentially a rod up through the set, and the tail had been lead-weighted, so if I swung it around, it would sort of kind of heavily move around and give it some kind of action. I love it!
And they were covered with raspberry jelly to give it that really squeamish look.
The scenes of the eels, actually what cracks me up is when they're going in the ears of the actors, the small ones that we used on their faces, it was so simple. Essentially I took a piece of foam and just with scissors I cut this thing up and segmented it just enough, painted it brown with I think Marks-a-Lots or something, laid it on the actor's face, so when I pulled it, the front part would stretch because the methacell was so thick on their face, and luckily then the back end, when I stopped, would kind of catch up, so it looks like it's inching forward. Couldn't have been simpler.
God's sakes. What is it?
The giant ear was Ken Ralston's favorite scene to play.
We had built like a half-scale eel, built this huge rubber ear, which just was hilarious. And we just, did all these things with rod puppetry work and stuff, sort of having it crawl into the ear and different versions of that. And I seem to remember going up into the rubber room, we called it, and the ear was there, and someone had built a giant Q-tip lying next to it. Oh, well, that stuff went on all the time. It was great.
It might help my analysis if I knew what Genesis was, beyond the biblical reference.
The Genesis effect is probably the first time that 3D CG work or computer graphics work was used in a motion picture.
Fascinating.
The Genesis effect was Ed Catmull basically running that whole show and all of his guys working under Jim Value.
Through most of our careers, the entire entertainment industry was not at all interested in computer graphics. So we wanted people to see what we did. We wanted them to get excited about it.
ILM next door one day came to us and said, hey, we got this little problem. They want to show this Genesis thing, and they need a demonstration story way to do that. We thought of putting some rock in a microwave oven and having it turn into a flower, and everybody thought that was really lame. So they said, can you think of something else? So I went off and thought about it. Basically, the idea was a planetary flyby, where we can turn a whole planet from a dead planet to a live planet.
This was the piece where you had this big minute-long sequence, full computer graphics, really opening up people's eyes, the potential that was there.
This is Admiral Kirk. We tried it once your way, Khan. Are you game for a rematch?
The battle in the Mataran Nebula was supposed to be submarines. Take her down, take her up, it was all that. He can't think in 3 dimensions.
This pattern indicates two-dimensional thinking.
There was always different kinds of boats that I was pretending we were on when they run out the guns in Star Trek 2. I mean, I said, give me a gun to run out. I want a cannon to, you know, I got all worked up about doing that. And then when we did the Mutara Nebula, it was, you're either inside this submarine listening for pings and things like that.
Nicholas Meyer was basically giving us that kind of input about how to go about designing it and how to get things to move and sort of like how everything is lurking around each other and hard to see, you know, each other inside the nebula. And that gave us a start as how to, you know, approach how we're setting up the cameras and the lighting and everything. And that's why there's all this strange stuff where you're looking straight down and you're seeing all the different levels they're going through, the three-dimensional thinking versus the two-dimensional, which is part of the movie. And that was all part of the same thing. It's like hiding in the murk of the deep sea and trying to play a cat and mouse game with each other.
Torpedoes ready, sir.
Fire!
To see the picture after it's finished for the first time really makes you proud, and to, of course, hear it with sound effects and music just really ties it all together, and it gives everything character, and that's always an exciting part of the movie-making process, to see it finished.
My reaction to the film was very, very positive. I felt that it, although I'm a big fan of the first film, I think that the second one kind of captured the energy and the spirit better of at least the Star Trek the way I remember it. People were running around and people were yelling at each other, and I think the effects as well were just more dynamic and exciting, and I thought it was really great.
What was exciting for me about working on Star Trek was when I was growing up, you know, and in school, I was a real avid fan of the show. I would watch it every week, and I loved it. And then to suddenly be working with these same people on Star Trek and trying to recapture more of what the TV show's energy was, that was very exciting. It was a blast. I had a great time on it.
Star Trek allows us the pleasures of escape. Literally, we defy gravity. We're gone. But we're not so far gone that we don't recognize the world or the problems in the world that are depicted. And I think it's a kind of a nice mix.